people need to really dive deeper into the data. One of the things that I've said constantly, like for forever, is that freight analysts aren't actually analysts. And a lot of them don't know SQL. A lot of them don't know R. A lot of them don't know Python. My analysts do. A lot of reasons why we might not be executing freight appropriately for an organization, but it ultimately impacts how we price freight. And so I think some brokers look at a rate and they're like, that was a bad rate. And it might have been the right rate at the right time. We just didn't execute it correctly. We believe that if you're going to automate transactional spot bidding, you should have your pricing team own it, or someone who is familiar with pricing own it from the standpoint of they're better at analyzing data.
Welcome to the Freight Show podcast. Today, we're joined by Chad Olesen, founder and CEO of AVRL, to break down how technology is transforming freight pricing and why most brokers still get it wrong. Chad shares how his journey from working with top 3PLs to building AVRL shaped his understanding of dynamic pricing and why averages don't tell the real story. He explains how data-driven strategies, automation, and composition scoring can help brokers price smarter, win more bids, and finally make automation profitable. We also explore the future of freight pricing, how speed, precision, and real market intelligence are changing the game, and why brokers who fail to adapt will be left behind. All right, let's dive in. This episode is brought to you by Vuma, the back-office automation platform for freight brokerages and 3PLs. From AI-powered document handling to streamlined workflows, Vuma helps logistics teams scale smarter. Learn more at vuma.com.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Freight Show. I've got my man Chad here on with us. Chad, it's great to see you.
It's good to see you, man. How are you?
Doing very well.
Awesome.
I'm excited for our conversation. Always enjoy them. You've always got compelling and interesting takes on things, and I love kind of hearing your story on things. Maybe to kind of kick it off, you've been at the forefront of brokerage pricing and the evolution of brokerage pricing over the last few years, and things that, it's probably one of the areas of brokerage where there, really has been some of the most meaningful and significant change just in the way that rates are thought about and delivered. But maybe you could kind of take us through your sort of perspective on where the industry has sort of come from over the last 10 years and maybe bring us up to the present, and we can start there.
My evolution is really interesting. That's a really hard question because a lot of people know my very first customers were top 10 3PLs. And some of them had seen me speak at an event for Walmart, and then they asked me to come into their office and do some stuff with them. And my first customers had large data science teams, big analytics teams. I've worked with Scott Friesen forever, and I've taken a lot of my learnings from people like that. As AVRL started to scale down the top, 50, 100, we realized that a lot of freight brokers didn't have the right tooling to be able to automate transactional spot bidding at scale. They thought that they did. They thought that they could use averages or blending strategies, but the market rates are too dynamic. And so what ends up happening is people are like, oh, DAT rates suck or Greenscreens rates suck. And in reality, they just don't know how to use them. And so what we've been working on at AVRL for, I don't even know, probably the past 2 years is how do we get customers to be successful with the rating rates that they bring to the table. And for us, it's been a transformation and a learning journey as well, primarily because we thought that the brokers knew more about pricing freight than we did. I think that they know a lot, but I think that they don't know why they believe a truckload costs a certain amount. And to deconstruct that has been really an interesting path that we've been on. And, a lot of people, I was talking to you about this before the show, is like a lot of people think about us as an automation company, really, or pricing company that does deploy our own automation in some areas. But like, just like you and I have worked together, like we have mutual customers that use you guys as the automation and we are the engine behind it. And so for us, like in our future state and where we're kind of headed is like, it doesn't matter who your automation provider is. I need to buy well in the market and understand where I don't buy well and deploy complex strategies. That's really what our technology does.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, we are like adjacent to it, and we've obviously partnered together, and like, it's such a, you peel the onion on it and you realize like to do that well is really, it's complex. What have you learned? Like, tell me more about like what you've learned about how to price freight. And you mentioned that the challenges of sort of overly relying on some of the like the benchmarks. How do you start to pass through that? How should folks be thinking about it?
I'm going to use like a really easy example. This is probably like a super common example that everyone could use. So if you take like a rate from Elizabeth, New Jersey to Chicago, this is a core lane with strong supply. And so companies are going to buy significantly below average in this lane. And what will end up happening is you will have incumbents on that lane that bring the rates higher. And so your average is an inflated average. The same exact time, you take the exact same market area, let's say Freehold, New Jersey to Chicago. Your rate is identical from an average perspective from Elizabeth to Chicago, but you don't buy at the average. You probably buy somewhere between low and average. And the reason why is it's still strong supply, but now you're non-core. You have a 40-mile deadhead on it. So when we look at a structure like that, we believe that companies traditionally don't really predict their cost well enough. I think a lot of companies who started to go after dynamic pricing, Convoy, Uber Freight, etc., they were looking at how do I price freight to win from shipper, not necessarily what is my cost to hire capacity in the market.
Oh, interesting.
And then if I can't win at my cost plus margin, maybe I actually don't want that freight at all. And this happens, everywhere, all across the country. The reason why methodologies like that are important is that when we look at automating quoting for a 3PL, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of shipments a day. And so you have to be more accurate where your costs are. Those costs obviously fluctuate too. If I won 3 shipments from Elizabeth to Chicago, my fourth rate probably can't be the same rate that it was on the first several, And so for us, really going into like complex, like composition scoring, like where do we buy relative to the market from, market region, not really lane. I don't think that people who price by lane are very successful. And so my team's coming in with complex strategies like that. It's like, hey, statistically, this is where you actually buy in the market. This is where you don't buy. Like, we actually want to focus on areas where we buy more competitively than other people.
Can I I want to make sure I'm tracking, say the first example, and maybe I can play it back to you, where you, on that lane, most brokers can buy below market because the market average is being pulled up because there's a lot of larger carriers on that, and what they're pricing just tends to be a little bit more premium. And so if you're actually going out and trying to secure the sort of like smaller carriers, you could probably buy below. That might not be true on a different market where you're going to buy higher because everyone, like, there are no major carriers on that, and so everyone's kind of trying to compete for the same capacity, or there's like more deadhead that is kind of wrapped up in that. And so a lot more of that capacity is there's going to be more variance because some of it's going to have to be coming into that area.
Correct.
Am I sort of thinking about that in the right way?
So take that example that I have, like Freehold and Elizabeth, very close together. However, we now have to convince a carrier to drive 40 miles to pick that load and then come back to Chicago. when you look at that structure, you have like two things, right? Like a lot of people look at like cost to hire capacity, but you also have cost to execute freight. And it's going to cost us more to execute freight out of that picks in Freehold than picks in Elizabeth.
And that is because of the deadhead primarily?
That's correct. Yeah. So like the rating structure, it's not like you want to go and add, $2 a mile for the 40-mile deadhead. That's not really how that works, but it is going to cost us more to serve that lane. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe take me through like how should you solve those problems? Those sorts of examples, like what would it look like to implement a pricing strategy that like properly adjusted for some of those things?
I think when you look at like implementing the strategy, it has to be like each company's strategy would be independent of one another based off of where they buy relative to the market, right? And so for us, like we actually do go through historic data and looking at, hey, statistically, we believe that you have an 87% of covering at or below this amount based off of where you historically buy that freight. And so you look at like major regions, markets, etc. You take like, the 13 bellwether states, 40% of the volume comes out of those states. Like we do want to target strategy outbound those regions. Or, hey, 15% of all the freight moves on the top 50 lanes. Like we do want strategies there. We basically want to build bucketing strategies to essentially accommodate for, hey, if there's outliers in my strategy, like let's say I traditionally buy from the like southeast to the northeast a specific way, there will be still markets inside the southeast and the northeast that are opposite of my traditional buying pattern. People need to really dive deeper into the data. One of the things that I've said constantly, like for forever, is that freight analysts aren't actually analysts. And a lot of them don't know SQL. A lot of them don't know R. A lot of them don't know Python. My analysts do. And we're coming in with analysts to really help companies analyze their data and understand where are we buying well, where are we not buying well, and trying to find trends and patterns in why are we fumbling freight in a specific region or in a specific facility. And a lot of times it has to do with carrier sales fumbling it, or we can't get an appointment, and so we didn't get it on the board fast enough. There are a lot of reasons why we might not be executing freight appropriately for an organization, but it ultimately impacts how we price freight. And so I think some brokers look at a rate and they're like, that was a bad rate. And it might have been the right rate at the right time. We just didn't execute it correctly. So there's a lot of things that go into the data analysis piece that we're doing with companies and helping them understand like, hey, your rates were actually accurate. That pick was, at 4 p.m. on a Friday and it dropped at 8 a.m. on a Monday. Like, of course you couldn't execute it at the rate.
Yeah, there's this interesting, I've been thinking about this recently where a lot of there's some challenges in thinking in sort of passing through the data, right? Because you also see, what I see, and I've chatted to various like operations leaders around, which is you set your customer sell rate based on what you think you're going to move the freight at, but they're actually like not independent variables either. You know what I mean? Like what you think you're going to pay is correlated with what you're actually going to pay. In the sense that like a lot of carrier teams will kind of try to work to hit the number, as well. And so there's some sort of like interesting dynamic there. But then to your point, it could go the other way as well, right? Which is like the rate was right, but you didn't execute it well, and that ballooned cost. And how do you actually like sort of tease out what was like a bad prediction versus how do you actually like sift through and sort of understand? I mean, that seems like you've got to kind of actually get into the data at like a pretty deep level to sort of to figure out the like signal there.
We don't look at cost and margin as one. We look at them as independent layers. And so we
say more about that. Yeah.
We splice the data. Broker submits a rate. It's $2,000. we don't look at that rate as $2,000. I look at it as my projected cost was $1,700 and my margin was $300. And so when you go and you actually do an analysis, you could actually look at costs separately from margin. It's the only way to do it.
That's interesting. And so when you work with folks, take me through, well, maybe I'm curious to understand, what do you think the like best practice is here? Like, I'd love to like understand, like, what do you think the like ideal sort of setup is for a broker that wants to be extremely good at pricing, and especially like pricing at scale? What do you think, like, what are their sort of strategies in it like actually look like? But then also, what is the setup internally, like maybe culturally, from a leadership perspective, from a capability perspective? What's the like sort of the DNA of folks that are involved in actually making that happen well?
I won't mention this customer, the name of the customer, but I have this customer that I was just talking about with you before the show, and their leadership knows that they know how to make money in automated pricing. And so they allow the account rep to control margin. However, if the account rep cannot control margin, they operate in a split model and they'll give it to their enterprise team to control the logic, because they do know how to make money with the automation. And I think that when we look at ideal setup, it obviously stems from leadership. Like, we either go all in or we don't go all in. I think you could probably agree with me on that with automation in general. It's like, hey, if you want to just like test it, don't, because you're not going to have buy-in and it will fail and you're going to blame the technology provider. We also require our customers to have a leader to drive our program. And I'm sure a lot of people have seen me post like pricing analyst roles and pricing director roles, because those people are hiring someone to come in and run our program. We personally believe something differently than a lot of 3PLs. We believe that if you're going to automate transactional spot bidding, you should have your pricing team own it, or someone who is familiar with pricing own it, from the standpoint of they're better at analyzing data. They're better at understanding, what was our MAPE or our margin of error, for those people who don't know what MAPE is. They're better at understanding complex strategies like, hey, we could support 8 shipments outbound Atlanta at X rate. After that, we cannot support it, And so for us, we're really helping companies find analysts. And I've met some really strong analysts over like the past year who I'm actually helping them try and find new roles, but it's because they understand unique blending strategies. They understand what goes into a cost prediction and how to separate cost versus margin. My team specifically, we have our own market intelligence team where we're coming in and teaching people how to do this. And I think that for us, we really believe that an organization really does need to want to automate it if they want to make money. It's kind of funny because I've had companies tell me like, oh, your tooling's like more complex than other people's. And my response is always like, well, do you care more about easy to use or do you care more about making money? And from leadership perspective, they care more about making money. Maybe some end users are like, hey, I want it easier to use. Our theory is maybe they're not the right person to run the technology, if that's the case. And I think for us, we've always been on this warpath of we need to educate the brokers to level up on technology, not dumb our tech down to meet the broker. Not saying that the brokers are dumb, but very intelligent, but they're just not as familiar with complex technology. I think one of the things that my organization is really trying to do is level our customers up. I think they're going to have to, especially as we continue to see margin compression.
And it sounds like you've made some like sort of investments in your team and sort of thinking about your own capability set and what you bring to the table. I'm curious where this sort of concept of the market intelligence team look like. I'm like, what does the like engagement model actually look like with customers?
It's interesting. We had originally started with this team called IBG, and it stands for Incoming Bot Group, where they would sit down with the broker and go through logic and understand, like how do you buy, like, etc. And I think that model was okay. However, they didn't know more than the broker. And
Right.
we were extremely lucky to hire someone who had been at CH, I think, for 17 years. He worked for another really big brokerage in Knoxville for 4 years, leading their analytics team. I've worked with him for probably 5 years. He was a free agent, and we jumped on the opportunity to build our team around him. He's building out a team of analysts and some other areas in data science to really help us understand how we deploy the best tooling for our customers. We think that as the market continues to grow, you have different probably data aggregators or data providers in the space. We really need to be the most familiar with what are the strategies that we could be to deploy to be successful with the Greenscreens, to be successful with the DAT, to be successful with someone's homegrown rating engine that needs to probably be rebuilt because it's too slow, things like that. But that team is super critical to my future. It's really where we shift from a technology provider to a consulting company, I think, is what you're going to see from us.
Yeah, and it sounds like, Chad, you're sort of on this journey where maybe in the early days of the business, you're sort of like starting with some of the automation, and then you've developed and accrued a lot of this understanding of the brains and the intelligence sort of layer, and maybe sort of take me through a little bit of that journey, and then you started to go there. What's the sort of future for the business that you're building?
It's interesting. I don't know what was our future. I do think that we're going to be a dominant player in transactional pricing. I think that we probably will be the dominant player.
Well, and even this transition of sort of starting to think of yourself more as a consulting company, which is a slightly different identity, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, I think our automation is incredible. Most people probably don't know this. We own our own browser, so we don't do RPA like a lot of people think that we do. We do full HTML manipulation, and we insert code into the shipper system that doesn't exist. And so it gives our customers the ability to apply custom strategies that other people wouldn't. And I think that we still retain that entire side where we want to deploy our own automation. We know it's best in class. When we look at where companies have failed with our model is that they didn't know how to price freight accurately at scale. And so for us in this transition into how do we help a customer come in and really not just implement automation that scales with their business and helps them win valuable freight. That's where we want to be as an organization. And I'd rather partner with companies like yours to go after the operational side so that we can trim fat and create margin expansion as we become more competitive from bidding.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Can I, one of the things that you said was that in order to implement spot quoting at scale like this, you really need to want to automate it. I'm curious about give me the bull case for why should you want to do this? What is the upside when this goes well? What's the sort of impact? Why do you think that this is the right direction for folks to move?
Yeah, I think that there's several reasons. I think that I'm going to talk about what is not important first. I think that originally the companies who tried to come in and automate transactional spot bidding were like, hey, you don't want your brokers spending time doing this. And I think that is the absolute wrong way to look at this. I think that the benefits of automating transactional spot freight at scale are undeniable. I know every single hole in my shipper's routing guide, and I can call Kroger tomorrow and tell them every single hole that they have, and that I already move active capacity on that lane, and I also buy below market. So when we look at automating transactional spot freight, I want to lead with data and analytics. And now I literally have insight into everything that's happening in my shipper's routing guide. That's super important, first of all, as I think that as you look at the space becoming more and more competitive, there are 3PLs who are consulting their shipper on where they have gaps or where they have a routing guide falling apart or where they have a carrier consistently failing. Hey, 8 weeks in a row, we saw this same freight. There's something that's happened inside your network. I think that's like the first layer is the data plays. I think it is like invaluable. Second,
so basically, like, because you are so deeply embedded in seeing and understanding all of the opportunities, you are building sort of like profiles of the contours of that freight that help you to understand where routing guides might be failing in ways that maybe they're not even sort of fully noticing, or maybe they are, but like this is data that allows you to then have a more compelling conversation about like, let me solve this problem for you.
Yeah, and I just so happen to also have trucks in that area, right? And I could support you. It was actually announced at oh my gosh, what conference? There was a conference like a couple weeks ago. I wasn't at it, but Matt Leo at CH, he texted me and he was like, hey, Sam Anderson from Bay & Bay was on stage today. And he was like, AVRL helped us win a $6 million award with a shipper we had never engaged with before. And it was because of that exact strategy that I just like described, where they knew where they had gaps in their routing guide. And so they literally, when they went to bid, they also had a discussion with the shipper about that specific lane. I think that it gives companies a massive leg up than the broker who bids on, spot freight when he has time. I think at scale, you couldn't, like, it's almost hilarious not to automate bidding, right? Like, I have 100% participation rate, right? Like, let's say I'm a broker and I work with USPS. You have to have, 70, 80% participation. Regardless of bidding or not, you still have to do it. What happens when they drop 1,900 loads on a Tuesday? Well, that means you have 4 people who are now actively managing that forward so that you don't lose that business. Like, automation is key there. I think also when you look at trying to identify opportunities where you're really good at buying and where you're not good at buying, a lot of brokers are guessing at what they think the rate should be. Then they don't have the ability to analyze it later on are we actually as competitive on that lane as we think that we are? And then I think like volume, I have a carrier in Birmingham, or if they're a broker in Birmingham, they're averaging 700 loads a month positive, these net new shipments, like that's a lot of freight. And so I like kind of laugh sometimes when people are like, oh, the market's like super rough. And yes, it is. But I also am not sure if everyone understands that there are some brokers who are making money and making a lot of money right now.
What are they doing differently? Like that is enabling that? Is it some of the stuff that you're describing, which is like, like a tighter kind of understanding of where they can buy, and so they're able to bid on and win a lot more business?
Yeah, I mean, get rid of the nukes, right? I mean, let's say you won 10 shipments and you lost $400 on 4 of them. You probably went negative. If I won 6 shipments that were all positive, like I'm probably in a much better place. And so I think that a lot of companies don't use complex strategies in bidding because it becomes too complex. And they're like, it's too hard to manage. It is until you're making money, right? And then all of a sudden your leadership's like, yeah, we're going to double down on this initiative completely.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if you can figure it out, the upside's huge. Yeah. But there is also the opportunity to blow yourself up as well, right?
Yeah.
And so, and maybe this kind of comes back to your first point, which is like, like dip your toes in the water here in some respects, right? Because it's a capability that needs to be developed internally, less about like, hey, do we get adoption, but more about, are we going to commit to making this work because we believe the upside potential is really large?
Yeah, and I think also on that note, like you're competing against some brokers who are taking it extremely seriously. And I'm not sure, like I've seen a couple of posts lately where someone would be like, I talked to a shipper and they're like completely against automation. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, Kimberly-Clark, Best Buy, LG, Kraft, like they won't even work with you if you can't just automate your bidding. Like they don't even have a load board anymore. Like I'm sitting here and I'm like laughing because I'm like, I don't know if a lot of brokers realize that at some point the shipper is going to require it. And I wouldn't want to be the broker holding the bag and hadn't ever started. That's a scary place.
Yeah, I think there is a little some folks like love to hear those stories because it helps then to sort of validate maybe a decision that well, we don't really have this capability yet.
Yeah.
But it does seem that the trend is kind of undeniable in some respects, right? Where and I kind of if I was sitting in a shipper's shoe, why would I not want to be able to instantly get prices that, and I can totally imagine that from a risk perspective, if you have trading partners that are bidding on stuff and are not able to honor it, well, that's probably not going to be a relationship that sticks around for a long time because, what will the providers that will end up winning are the ones that can bid in this way and will execute and can execute because they're doing that bidding accurately.
Yeah, I think that's like the same thing with some of these posts that I've seen recently about RFPs, right? Like the shippers aren't wanting you to price all 40,000 lanes. Like we want to see the ones that you're the most competitive on. And there was, I did this case study article with Transportation Topics and Dylan at Axle. And what he, there's this huge write-up about it. And Dylan was like, what makes Axle so successful at this is that we don't participate in everything. We only bid on what we're really good at moving. And I think that that's a big difference between some brokers who really kind of fail at automating transactional freight and then the ones that succeed is, I don't want to take money. I don't want to take loads that I'm going to lose money on, or I'm going to have to reprice, or I'm going to have to give back. We shouldn't just participate in them. We should literally participate in what we're good at. And we should talk to the shipper about it.
Yeah. You mentioned though that in some instances shippers are requiring 70 to 80% participate. Is that that you are putting a bid in on 70 to 80% of spot loads that are getting
participate? That's I want a participation. Either you're bidding on it or you're not bidding on it. I want to know, are we going to participate and at what rate, or am I not participating at all in that?
So a decision, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. So because I was going to say that probably is a recipe then for shit. But it makes sense. So it's the ability to kind of say yes or no. And then if you're saying yes, to be able to execute on what you say you can do.
Yeah. And I think also let's not undervalue the fact of why I'm not participating, right? I want to sit down with the shipper and walk them through a data table and be like, hey, I didn't participate in these loads because of X, Y, and Z. And I think that there's value in evaluating also what we're not participating in holistically from an organizational level. Hey, I didn't bid on any same day loads. You go back and you look, that's 35% of my business that you're not even participating. Are there areas where I could participate in same day freight? Maybe not 4-hour lead time, but if it is posted at 8 a.m. and it picks at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, could I support that? Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. One of the other objections that I hear from folks is that this is that this practice is a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you say to that.
I mean, it's laughable. I think that there are some shippers that are looking for the lowest price freight always. Okay. And I'll use some water companies as an example. Okay. I'm going to use Niagara, Nestle USA, and Danone. Okay. So Niagara, they want the cheapest provider, right? Nestle will pay a premium on their product, and Danone is a little bit more neutral. Even though I'm moving the exact same commodity, I shouldn't price all three the same. I could have the same lane, right? Chicago to Memphis. All three of those shippers should be priced differently based off of probability of coverage plus my margin. And
Mm.
so I actually think like, yeah, there are shippers for sure that want that race to the bottom. But I think that there are really a lot of shippers that are looking for what's the rate, what's my relationship with this carrier, and am I willing to pay a premium on it? One of my market intelligence team strategy is like, rate doesn't matter if you don't have a relationship. We have to have a relationship with the shipper. We should be talking to the shipper daily, weekly, about what's happening in the market. The people who are racing to the bottom, they don't have a relationship with that shipper. I think that's like a failure at the organizational level completely.
On the shipper side, what are their systems around this? So obviously they're sort of putting their loads out, receiving bids. What does it look like from their perspective? How often is there a system or algorithm or like version of like something that is deciding who to tender the freight versus like a human actually making that decision? And how is that changing or evolving at all?
I think that the human making a decision about the freight is like statistically how it's going to happen. I think there's probably only a couple of shippers that are using like automated systems.
Okay.
However, I'm going to use like an example of an like a API framework. So let's say you're Dollar General. You require responses back from your carriers in 3 seconds or it times out. Okay. So you look at like a rating engine, right? A rating engine takes, a second. But what they don't tell you is that Blue Yonder is going to take a half second on this side and a half second on this side to process. So you only have, 2 seconds to like read the load, price load, return a rate. We were working with a lot of our customers on speed of transaction. My system processes data in about 25 milliseconds. For those of you who aren't as technical, it takes you like 400 milliseconds to blink. We are trying to rework a lot of our larger customers' pricing engines to get them under a second so that I can get them in first. Because if let's say have 100 brokers or 100 carriers who are submitting rates, they are getting ranked first, second, third, fourth by speed. And then you're dealing with the planner's time and attention, right? So the planner's probably not going to look at all of them. They're probably going to eyeball it. Hey, I like that person, select.
So is that that it's literally that fast? So
yeah,
like
it's that fast, yeah.
A planner clicks the button and so the 3 seconds is actually just driven by them not wanting their team to like wait 5 seconds to get all.
So the 3 seconds is driven by the fact that Blue Yonder will time out after 3 seconds. So you won't even receive the rate if it takes longer
it's
than
not
that.
the shipper like requiring 3 seconds, but the system needs that. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you've got to get back in.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I wish I could tell everyone the name of this this carrier. It's a 4PL that we work with, and we work with their brokerage side. They brought us a bunch of data because they weren't winning freight from their own managed trans division. And we went and looked, and it was because, the rating engine would take on upwards of 8 seconds to process data because they would pull data from, X system and this system and this system and this system. And then it would aggregate it and process it, right? So a lot of 3PLs, like while you have a tech team, like a lot of them don't know about parallel processing. A lot of them don't understand that you can do calculations and parallel process data at the same exact time. We've been going in and working with our customers on rebuilding their rating engines to get them in under a second. I think it's really important.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
One thing that I think about often is what is the optimal way to price freight, or like how should this whole sort of thing work? Because one of the things that's interesting is that the market over the years has gotten a lot more competitive, and so there's been this increasing pressure. Like if you go back 30 years, I was not brokering freight and I wasn't in the industry, but as I understand it, a lot more of this stuff was you had time, right? So you would, get an opportunity, you might call some carriers and you're actually kind of not bidding off a prediction of the market, but something that like resembled or like, oh, I'm definitely going to be able to move this rate, and then you would sort of mark it up. But now, obviously like the speed, everything kind of pushes you in this direction of needing to make predictions. So there's sort of one thought that I have is there a way actually to get back to, like with technology, to some version where bidding is happening based on real-time carrier bids as opposed to predictions? So that's like one thought. The other is that when I see a lot of, and maybe this is a lot of what you tackle, is that you can kind of have like a regression model essentially to sort of predict rates, but the way that you actually price it, to your point, is it's actually it's not quite that, right? It's like, hey, if it's my first 3 loads, it goes like this, but then it's actually going to jump a lot, and if there's weather, it's going to look like this, and in this scenario, I'm actually going to, and it's not quite this, like you throw all of those like variables in a regression model, you get some sort of blended average that is definitely wrong, but like technically correct. And I'm curious sort of what you think about like, what do you think that like, how should this work in a perfect world if you could kind of like change anything about how the industry was sort of structured, or maybe that there was like technology that existed everywhere? And what do you think, what do you think about that sort of other piece where it's, the way that you actually kind of need to do this well is that you're accounting for all of these variables that don't sort of move in this smooth way?
My theory is that we probably don't want to use like machine learning models to price freight. I think that it could be, I think that the market is so dynamic that people who try and use machine learning probably end up overfitting their models. I think that I have this customer tell me one time that rates don't matter. And I kind of almost like believe that rates don't matter, because it really does it is still really based off of relationship. And so a shipper might be willing to, sell you freight for more than me. And that's kind of like the reality of the world. And so we look at like, what is like my cost to buy capacity? You and I don't have the same cost to buy capacity, because you don't have as strong, like I don't have as strong a carrier sales team as you do. Or maybe I have a carrier rep who sells a load on the first call, and you call 15 carriers and actually negotiate it. And so I think like for us, we don't have this like perfect, like this is what it is, and this is the strategy that you need to deploy. When we go in and we look at data, we build them like what we think the strategy is based off of how they traditionally buy. And then we obviously model it and change it. But we form our hypothesis based off of that. And it's not a black box. I want to look at everything, every reason why I increased a rate or decreased a rate, or why I'm adding margin here, or is this a cost here? We think that the companies who are going to fail and who have failed, they generate a rate from a black box, and then we don't have a way to dissect it. That's a dangerous place.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm curious. One of the things that you've spoken a lot about is how every company buys differently, and I imagine as you get in and sort of look at the data, you can start to sort of reveal these things. But it's not like a static thing, right? Like you might be able to say, hey, we are actually like seeing a shitload of business on this lane, and we're not buying well. I'm curious like how that data ends up getting used to like build better capabilities on the carrier side. Like, maybe like building lane density, or like how that data actually sort of translates into like how do you move your capability and your buying expertise.
Yeah, I'll give like an example. Let's say that you buy at average from DAT, like as an example, you moved 100 loads, and you buy at average because on 50 of them you bought 5% above, and on 50 of them you bought 5% below. That doesn't necessarily mean that you buy it average. That means that you buy 5% away from DAT every single time. And on some lanes, your 5% could lose you $100. And on some lanes, the 5% could lose you $200, and so we don't go in, like when we go in and do the analysis, like we look at a lot of companies actually buy, 15, 20% away from DAT on every load. So like the average is the aggregated average of the industry, but we look at, are there incumbents on this lane? What's capacity look like on this lane statistically? And so we want to go in and do an analysis on that. Like that's what we want to go in and look at. But companies I think that companies like traditionally probably talk shit about DAT and they're like, DAT's rates suck. And I just think that they don't know how to use them and they don't know how to, I just don't think that they know how to use them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. What do you think? How do you think a broker should be benchmarking the performance of their carrier team? Because one way that folks do it is to sort of look at the DAT and how you're sort of buying relative to that. But sometimes that's like sandbagging, and sometimes it's not. Like what have you sort of seen there?
It's hard because there's a lot of reasons why we could fumble freight. We could fumble freight for like a number of reasons. I'll use like an example of one that I see like constantly. So like we look at lead time as, same day, next day, right? Like that's how a lot of people look at it. Well, Crown and Cork, 40% of their freight trades over 15 days out, which means that if today I'm bidding on Crown and Cork's freight, 40% of it doesn't pick for 15 days, which means I'm not even going to take that into the carrier market for 11 days, right? But I'm going to get awarded it today. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 11 days, one. And then what does the market look like then? And so I think that a lot of people, like when you're manually bidding, right? People look and they evaluate extremities like that. And they're just like, I don't want to bid on that, or I don't want this, or like, I don't want this, or like, this is good, or whatever. We look at it and we're like, okay, I now actually have to project my cost 11 days from now when I take it into the carrier market. So like what, like I'm going to project my cost based off of pick, not based off of why I'm bidding right now in real time. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. Especially because the market will catch up at some point, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Chad, I love going deep on this. You know a ton about this stuff, and I've learned a lot from this conversation. Really appreciate it and enjoyed chatting.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, man.